When it comes to setting up for the front squat, one of the first things that we have to ensure is that the J-hooks are at the proper height. A lot of people make the mistake of setting the J-hooks either too high or too low, consequently resulting in it becoming more difficult to either rack or unrack the barbell. As an example, if the J-hooks are too high relative to your collarbone, then what will end up happening is you'll have to go up on your tippy toes to remove the bar from the J-hooks. And as well, when you go to put it back on the rack, if you've lost your bar position at all during the set, which does happen from time to time during intense efforts, you'll often struggle to safely place the bar back onto the hooks. If you set the J-hooks too low, which doesn't seem like a big issue, you run the risk of exerting a significant portion of energy as you perform a partial squat to get the bar up and out of the J-hooks. Secondly, when you go to put the bar back, if they are significantly lower than they should be, you could risk injury trying to maneuver the bar back down without dropping it. Now, once you've gotten the bar set up at the proper height on the J-hooks, such that it's almost at the same height as your collarbone, give or take a slight deviation, the next step is ensuring that we get the bar positioned in the proper placement. That placement, ideally, is going to be such that the bar is on the meaty part of the front delt, where you can feel the protrusion of when you raise your arm out in front of you, like so. It's going to be resting right about here. You should feel that meaty part that I'm referencing, and that will be on both sides. Now, when the bar is positioned there, we want it tucked up against the neck, but not literally on the neck, as otherwise it'll make every repetition you do and every set you do miserable, as it'll feel like you're choking the entire time, and that's not what we're aiming for here. So understanding where we're aiming to position the bar, the next thing we have to do is actually get the bar into that position with the grip that we're going to employ. Now, the grip on the front squat becomes a little bit interesting. So you've likely seen the front rack position, where the bar is resting on the fingertips and the elbows are up to the sky. So some people have the relative mobility to get all of their fingers under the bar properly. I personally do not. I can manage 2, sometimes 3. So what this looks like is I'm going to get the bar onto the meaty part of the front delt, resting just like so up against the neck. I'm going to be lifting my elbows as high as possible. This is a front rack position. For some people, getting the bar into position like that just isn't feasible, considering that they often don't have adequate mobility through their upper body to manage it. Or if they can barely squirm into position, it's so awkward that they won't be able to safely maintain control of the bar throughout the squat. That being said, there's 2 other setup options that you can entertain for the front squat should you not have interest in utilizing that specific grip setup, or if you plan to prioritize the relative mobility to overcome your individual limitations so that you can use it in the future, but you would still like to work the front squat variation in interim until you're able to utilize and employ that grip setup in the future. One of those 2 grip options, or setup options if you will, because you're not really gripping the bar per se, is a zombie setup. It's almost a false setup for the front squat. You're basically going to position the bar so that it's still on the meaty part of the front delt, but you're going to fully extend the arms out in front of you with your thumbs up to the sky, and you're going to raise the arms up like so. The bar is still against the neck, as you might have heard from the slight change in my voice there, but it's not on my neck, so much so that it's creating incredible discomfort. I'm able to raise my arms and consequently my elbows up so that throughout the squat itself, I'll be mimicking the upright torso that the front squat requires, while being able to maintain the bar in the proper position throughout the entire set. Now, the second alternative that we have, other than the zombie setup variation, and of course if the front rack either isn't something you can do efficiently or effectively at this point relative to your individual mobility and limitations, or you just have no interest in the front rack setup itself, is the arms cross setup. And this happens to be my own personal preference when it comes to the execution of the front squat, especially when that weight starts to get heavy. Now, understanding that, this setup is also my preference because I have little to no interest whatsoever in the front rack setup, considering my individual aims and preferences in the weight room under the bar. So, without further ado, you're going to get that bar positioned on the meaty protrusion of the front delt, crossing the forearms over, and you're going to place your fingertips and thumb on the bar itself, pressing it up against the neck, but not on the neck, and you're going to simply stand up just like so, and you're able to crank your elbows up as you need to ensure that that barbell remains in the proper position. And you'll notice as I uncross one of my arms here that I'm maintaining a very minimal grip on the barbell with the two fingers and the thumb. And although that grip itself is quite minimal, it comes in quite handy, pun intended, in consideration of controlling the bar placement on those relatively intense sets. It allows you to keep the bar where you need to keep it, or at the very least, you can slow down the process of losing that optimal positioning because you do have a little bit more control over the bar than you might otherwise. And so if you're doing a heavy single and it's an all-time 1 rep max, or maybe you're working a set that just so happens the final 2 reps are coming really close to failure relative to your individual capacity, this could be the differentiating factor that allows you to maintain adequate control over the bar, so much so that you can finish the set without having to dump the weight. Now I'm going to use the arms crossover setup for this demonstration here, but once you have the bar positioned on the meaty part of the front delts, your grip is positioned on the bar as you desire. You are going to set an effective brace, and you are going to maintain an upright torso, proud chest, while driving those elbows up above parallel with the floor to ensure you're maintaining an optimal bar positioning. And you will then stand up and remove the bar from the J-hooks. Taking one step back, strategically, from there, we are going to set the foot placement such that your heels are about in alignment with your hips and your toes are turned out on an approximate 30-degree angle. Once in proper position, you'll execute a full range of motion front squat. Full range of motion being the key. A few points to consider. We want to make sure that the knees remain in alignment with the toes throughout the entire repetition and the consequent set. We want to maintain the elbows up above parallel with the floor and an upright torso, and the bar path should be maintained over the midfoot throughout the entire rep and every rep of the entire set. When it comes to baling with the front squat, I'm not a big fan of simply dumping the weight just because it's not loaded directly on the spine. So you'll notice I've set the safeties at an appropriate height that should I get to the bottom of the front squat and have to dump the weight, done. I'm not risking injury, as the straps or potentially the pipes that you might have access to should be set within reason relative to your individual range of motion. This may take a little bit of troubleshooting, but over time, you'll become very aware of where the proper setup is, assuming you're not always changing gyms or the style of squat rack that you might normally use, and you'll be able to efficiently and effectively set up the safeties, mitigating risk of injury for you should you run into a situation where you need to dump the weight itself. Hopefully this simple setup video proves progressive and actionable relative to your own proficiency of execution with the barbell front squat. Should you have found it of value, I invite you to make sure to follow or subscribe, depending of course on what social media platform you might be seeing this video on. And as per usual, if you happen to have any specific topics, training, nutrition, lifestyle related that you'd like to see me cover, make sure you send them my way, whether it's a comment on the video or a private message. Reach out, and if I'm able to cover them in an upcoming video, You can bet that I will.